I call this meeting to order. This is the annual public hearing of the district's 2021-2022 World's Best Workforce Plan. Today is Monday, November 8th, 2021, and the time is 6:15 p.m. Following the presentation by the World's Best Workforce Plan, the goals and strategies for the 21-22 school year by Hope Langston, the district's Director of Instructional Services, there will be an opportunity for members of the community to provide feedback. As a reminder, Northfield Public Schools requires all people over the age of 2 to wear a face covering while inside a Northfield School District facility, including during meetings of the school board. And as a reminder to board members, our opportunity to ask questions and provide comments will take place during the board's regular school board meeting immediately following this public hearing. Also, if there are community members present that wish to address the board, we will do that following, we will take those comments following Hope's presentation. So with that, welcome Hope.
Good evening, everyone. Is this mic on? Closer. All right, here we go. So I'm just going to give a shout out to Claudia and Tom, and I think that's it, who have already heard this, right, and given feedback. So thank you, because there's a lot of information to go through tonight. So again, I'm going to cover it fairly quickly to stay within the time frame, but welcome your questions, either tonight or as you think of them. So I'm pleased to present the 2021 World's Best Workforce Report to the board. And as you may recall, this work is grounded in legislation from 2013, which said that all school districts must report on 5 goals and must present them with disaggregated data that includes all students. And in fact, we are actually measured on our submission that's due on December 15th, and we get a report back. So here we go. All of our work is again grounded in our vision and mission statements. I'm not going to read them, but just know that is the foundation for everything we do. And as you know, we are coming off a year and a half of very unusual schooling. And I think that this is a time when we are taking pause to rethink and rebuild and move forward. And so I want to just use those 3 words as the basis of everything that we go through tonight. So we are required to report on qualified teaching staff, and that is Minnesota's effort to make sure that students of color and students who are economically challenged have access to high quality, experienced teachers. And so did not click to that. So how do I get to that view? You know? I'm seeing that, but I want you to see the table. Can you click the link? I did. Coming out here to help you. Okay. So I think the biggest takeaway from the table that you will see is that despite what we think about our FRP rates, the free and reduced lunch rate in our schools, none of our schools, from the lowest poverty school to the highest poverty school, which is the ALC, which has an FRP rate in the mid-40s this year, none of our schools qualify as either a high poverty or a low poverty school. We're right in the middle. And that would be the same in the context of the state for the percentage of students of color. We are right in the middle. And I think that's important to note because we tend to lose sight of that greater context, but in terms of World's Best Workforce, we're right in the middle in terms of representation for the district. So I'm gonna move on.
Yeah, and the table that Hope is referring to is in your packet.
Okay, so goal 1 is all about readiness for school. And we knew that last year, I was able to stand before you, well, on Zoom, and tell you that cohort coming in was extremely high performing. And we knew back then that this was either going to be a one-shot deal or we were going to start seeing a trend. So our goal was based on that cohort's performance, and we were looking for 75% of our incoming K students to meet the grade level benchmark on the MAP test. And in the interim period of time, we did switch our benchmarking tests. And if you've been in the district, Noel, you know for sure, and Julie, that we have been a MAP district since early 2000s, since MAP first came out. But what we were running into is MAP no longer being on the MDE recommended list for dyslexia screener. And also, in order to get to that point, we were going to have to add a second MAP platform, and we were having to use DIBELS, which required that our teachers go into a separate platform to measure fluency. So we had a work team that came together late spring and looked at benchmark testing, and we moved to something called the Renaissance STAR test. So this year, that's what our K kids took. These are the results, and you can see that we did not hit 75%. Both are nationally normed tests. Both have actually had some studies linking the performance on both, so I feel comfortable that we would have performed similarly on a MAP test. And there you can see the trends. So we know that fewer of our kids attended preschool during the pandemic. Enrollment was down across the city in our preschools. And I think we're seeing some of that play out. And it's a different cohort of kids. And I'm going to go back to that rethink and rebuild and move forward. This is the new baseline. This is where we're starting from. So readiness for K. We continue to use our preschool and family engagement navigators. We believe that having that support, helping families get connected with preschools and early childhood resources is key. We have implemented the pre-K Hegarty curriculum at the NCEC. We've had great reports about that. In fact, they're thinking about adding the Spanish component to one of their classes that has a lot of Spanish-speaking students in it. We have Minnesota Reading Corps at the NCEC this year, and we have Connie Nelson as the internal coach, so that's great. And we know that if we are able to intervene with kids at this age, the time it takes to remediate and get them caught up is far less than it would take as they grow older. So we want to make sure that we are reaching these kids as quickly as possible. And then we are using talking points in all of our buildings. And you're going to hear about that. I think you probably already have, but we have had great success with that platform in reaching our students. And it is a two-way texting platform that translates into over 100 home languages in both directions. So the teacher can text in English, and it goes to the parent in their home language, and vice versa. They can text in their home language, come back to the teacher in English. So we think that's a great way to, again, build that family engagement in our schools. And then coming off of the pandemic, Erin and I are committed to rebooting that preschool data sharing process where they share their aggregate attendance with us, and then we go out with their STAR data and show them their results as a cohort, not at the student level. We're protecting our student level data, but as a group. And that has been a really valuable experience, and we need to kickstart that, right? Because everybody is coming off really some major disruption, especially in the population of some of our preschools who saw a great decline. So looking ahead to 21-22, our readiness goals that 70% of our K students will meet the grade level benchmark on the fall STAR early literacy test. Just make sure I didn't miss any notes. I did want to say on talking points, I looked last week and our families have sent over 6,600 text messages back to our school staff. So they are just beneath what the staff has sent to them. So families are for sure engaging in this platform and find it easy to use. Next goal, all third graders can read at grade level. And we came in, we had left the goal the same. 70% of third graders will meet or exceed grade levels on the 2021 MCA. And if you recall, we had been on an upward trend after the adoption of CCC and putting into place a consistent curriculum across the district. And you can see the impact of the pandemic. The pandemic disruption impacted every demographic group in the district. And that's where we're at. So I'm going to have you look, because I'm pretty sure it's not going to show up, at the state context. So if you have that in front of you, it's a table with a number of columns. And I don't typically show this here, but I feel like this is super important to share this year. And this table represents what our district looks like in the context of the wider state in comparison with 01 districts, so public school districts like us. We remained above the state average in both reading and math and science in every grade level, so that's a win. We did see declines. You saw it in third grade. We saw it at almost every grade level except for fifth. But the key is the percentage of districts who had proficiency rates at or beneath Northfield's. And you can see, for example, in third grade, our proficiency rate of 60.2% was still higher than 82% of the districts. And in fact, there was only one district, Chatfield, that was at 81.4%. Every other district in the state, including like districts you would be surprised to note, were below that. So the pandemic affected all of us. It affected all of our kids, and disrupted schooling is just not where we want to be in terms of reading instruction. So you're going to see that reference back to this table for each of the goals where we are using MCAs as our metric. It's not an excuse, but the reality is, again, that the baseline data coming out of a pandemic year and a half is what it is. And this is where we have to start. Our staff know this and understand this, and we will move ahead and grow from there. So for third grade action steps, the district added additional FTE to buildings so they could support grade levels with higher student counts. That included grade 3 at Bridgewater and at Spring Creek. And we are also using whole class interventions and trying to support teachers in the implementation of those whole class interventions. There was a guided data PLC where they were looking at the median scores for their class and then determining what whole class intervention they could implement. And then the other thing that we are using is flexible grouping. And that is across grade levels to allow us to provide very targeted instruction and enrichment to students in a grade level based on their needs. And we believe that using these two approaches will accelerate the growth of our students. And that's really what we're seeing. We just finished our second round of STAR testing. We did see some really nice gains in kids. And so I think we just need to keep doing what we're doing. And I think we're going to see some nice growth in our students. We continue to use SIPs, which we've talked about before. It's an intervention that aligns with our core reading instruction. It is systematic phonics and phonemic awareness instruction. We have reading interventionists who are using SIPs, and then some other reading interventions that we have seen success with. And then finally, we have Minnesota Reading Corps support. And I just want to give it a shout out to Teresa Bauman and the Reading Corps tutors, because we have 2 in each building, and they see a lot of kids, and they see kids starting in K up through grade 3. And these are targeted interventions that contribute to student reading growth. So our goal for next year is that 65% of our students will meet that proficiency level on the 3rd grade MCA. Goal 3, racial and economic achievement gaps between students are closed. And historically, we've done a number of different things with this goal. We've looked at using actual achievement gap metrics with MCAs, and then we shifted to attendance because in looking at our data as a district, we saw some disparities between student groups. So our goal had been that 90%, the attendance rates of free and reduced lunch students in our Hispanic student groups would meet or exceed 90% for the 2021 school year. Now, as you know, attendance was a tricky thing during the pandemic because the state gave us some very clear guidelines about how to take attendance. It was fairly lenient, and so it wasn't the best metric during the pandemic. The state still has their North Star goal. We're coming up on the deadline of that, that all student groups would hit that 90% mark. And because of their guidelines, they decided not to calculate accountability attendance data. And so that is not available for us. And again, it's 1 year delayed, like graduation rates. But we did use our local attendance data, and you know that we've worked really hard to ensure that buildings are taking attendance consistently. We have really tried to track quarantine absences and other illnesses pretty closely, but you still see higher percentages of some of our student groups missing more than 10%. So we are gonna stay in that space, and because we think we can make a difference with attendance. And we have Heidi and Heidi Ramirez, Cindy Santa, who are our family engagement navigators, and we are covering all 3 elementary schools now, which is fantastic. We have Sebastian Bursette, who works really hard to support the secondary level. And so these are folks who can immediately respond if there are students who are not at school for the day or are encountering some other barrier to their attendance. We also are working to further develop our district MTSS process and the dashboard. Carrie Duba is taking the lead on that. We're working with a company called 5Lab, who is helping us build a holistic dashboard about, for our students in our buildings. That pulls in all sorts of data, not just test scores. And we think that again, if we can intervene as a system instead of as a building, we can have family approaches that will help us be more efficient and streamlined in tackling some of the barriers that our families are facing in their attendance. We also have Check and Connect Promise Fellows, and these are Promise Fellows that have been trained in that approach through University of Minnesota, and it's an engagement intervention, and they are working with our secondary students to increase attendance for kids at that level who may be encountering some difficulty. We are continuing our equity PLC work each month and really just asking teachers to dig in this year to specific practices that they can utilize in their classroom. So last year was more theory and learning about bias, and this year it's like, hey, what kind of things can we do in our classroom to help all kids feel like they belong, all kids feel like they can be successful, and so that's the approach that we are taking on the 3rd Wednesday each month. And then we are administering something called the Student Engagement Instrument. And really what our goal is to make sure that every student feels connected to some adult at our school. Because we know that those connections are hugely important for kids, and it helps them want to stay in school and be in school and motivate them. So it's really about making sure that every student feels connected in our district. So our goal for 21-22 is that the attendance rates of our free and reduced lunch and students of color groups will meet or exceed the rate of their non-free and reduced lunch and white peers in 21-22. Goal 4, all students are ready for career in college. We had 2 goals that we were looking to reach. One was centered on 8th grade math and reading MCA performance. And again, if you recall, 8th grade, it had some nice upticks. And then the second piece of this is the percentage of our students reaching all 4 college-ready benchmarks on the ACT. And so those would be the subtests, reading, math, science, and English. We did not reach those goals. 8th grade MCA reading proficiency landed at 60% and 8th grade math at 55%. The percentage of the class of 2021 who met the ACT college ready benchmark was 34. We know that the disrupted schooling, the hybrid model, was particularly hard on our middle school students. This is a lot to ask of them to navigate. 2 days at school, 3 days at home. And so we saw it across all metrics for that age group. And you will see in the state context for the MCA, so did every other middle school. And so this is just a tough age to not have a normal school year. So there you see the reading trends. And again, every demographic group impacted. Same with math. And then in terms of that state context, I just want to point out a couple things. 8th grade science, 45.7% proficiency rate. And if you looked at that proficiency rate alone, you know, your heart might skip a beat, right? That proficiency rate was higher than 91% of public school districts in Minnesota. So the proficiency rates in the middle school were impacted for sure by the pandemic. And you can see that in the state context for Northfield. That I will tell you that I'm meeting with the science team, and they are working every Wednesday to look at curriculum changes as they are facing standards implementation changes. And this is a group that is committed and hardworking. And I know that we will be back with improvement. So shout out to them. ACT, as a district, we dropped slightly. As a nation, the ACT was at its lowest score in history, lowest average score in history. And there you see the trends in the percentage of students meeting all 4 benchmarks. Slightly above the state and well above the nation for Northfield. So action steps for this benchmark. The middle school is working super hard this year. Their Wednesday PLCs are devoted to the implementation of AVID. And they are working really hard. There's an excellent site leadership team. One of our coaches, Michelle Bauer, shout out to her. She's working with those teams. And shout out to Greg and Michael and the middle school staff who are committed to launching this program successfully. We also continue to use expansion or to expand the college in the schools at Northfield High School. So that allows students to get credit while they are in high school, get college credit. We are using Edgenuity at the high school to allow students who needed to make up credits to do so in a flexible environment during the workday with some targeted support. ACT prep has been implemented as part of CCR time for students who are desiring to get some extra help with that. And then Naviance is a program that we use to facilitate the college application process, but it also comes with a heavy-duty ACT practice module. And so they're working hard to make sure that kids know about that module, that they use that module, and are able to get some extra practice in. So for this year, we are looking at 65% proficiency on the MCA in 8th grade for both reading and math. And then for the next 2 years, a class of 2022, who already took their junior year state test, and then the class of 2023, that we would reach that 40% benchmark for all 4 subtests. Finally, all students graduate from high school. We wanted to achieve a 4-year graduation rate of at least 95%. At the district this year, their 4-year graduation rate was 90%, and it was 96% at Northfield High School. There you can see the trends over time. And again, like every other metric we are looking at this year, across all demographic groups, you can see the impact of that 1.5 years of disrupted schooling. Whoops. Northfield High School continues to remain quite high in its 4-year rate. And then, as you recall, the ALC was identified as a school in need of support based on its all and white graduation, 4-year graduation rate. We all know how we feel about having ALCs be identified because every student who graduates from an ALC program is a win. But they were held to the same standard as every other high school. There is talk that is going to change, so we'll wait and see how that plays out. But we are in the 3rd year of having to basically assure you that we are still working on the plan that was developed in the 1st year. We've been very fortunate. In fact, I just met with our Regional Center for Excellence advocate last week, who's been assigned to work with the ALC, Ashley Carlson. She's fantastic. She's an EL expert. She helped us rewrite our entire EL plan last year. So we've been fortunate in the support that's been offered to them. But as you can see, the ALC kids were impacted last year, and their graduation rate, which had been on the upswing for 2 years, declined. So for action steps for our graduation rate, we continue to use peer helpers at the high school. They are both academic peer helpers and then peer helpers that are selected by their fellow students. And that is a great program and it has had a tremendous impact. And again, Carrie Duba still is involved with that and helping to lead the way for those students. We continue to watch how we track grad cohorts and really keeping an eye on who is where, and it's trickier than it sounds, believe it or not, because the cohort is identified in the freshman year. Credit recovery for Edgenuity, again, it's an updated platform. You may recall we used Odyssey-ware. Odyssey-ware is being sunsetted. Edgenuity allows us a lot more features, and I think people are pretty happy with that. One of the greatest things I think that's happening at the high school is this course mapping. And so what high school teams are doing is making sure that each of their courses has their standards identified and aligned so that if a student runs into a difficulty with a course, they do not have to make up the entire course. They make up the standards that they were not proficient in. So we're not there. We're beginning the process this year, but that's pretty exciting because it means that we can look at a very targeted approach to credit recovery. Instead of a class level, it's a standards level. And that's a win for kids. We talked about our Check and Connect Promise Fellows, and again, how they are reaching kids who might be running into challenges. And then again, talking points to build those family connections. So we are looking again to reach that graduation rate of 95%. The summary, you know, it's been a long time since we've been in a place where we didn't meet a single one of the goals, but that is, again, where we are at. And we're just going to start anew. So our achievement and integration report, if you recall, we are in the second year, we're finished the second year of a 3-year plan. We had a goal around FRP, ACT performance, and Accuplacer performance, and then the proficiency gap at the middle school, and then increasing student awareness of district data. So we did have an uptick in the student percentage of FRP students meeting the college ready benchmark for the composite score. Not where we want to be. We wanted to be, we still have another year left, but this one's going to be a stretch. But we're going to continue to work towards progress on this. And again, all of the action steps we hope will contribute to this, including a Promise Fellow who is assigned to the guidance office, school counseling office at the high school, the addition of a counselor at the high school, so that we can really reach kids and reach them quickly as they need it. So I'm hopeful that we will continue to make inroads into meeting this goal. The achievement gap this year was 36%, so slightly higher than it had been. So we did not see an improvement in reaching that goal. And then we, of course, could not have a data summit. The last data summit we had was in 2019, right before the pandemic, December of 2019. But we are looking at doing a summit in 2022, even if it's just local, because the student feedback on those data summits was tremendously positive, and we know that that is something we want to continue to do. So that's all I have for tonight. I look forward to your questions, and I thank you.
Thank you, Hope, for your presentation. So I would ask now if there are any community members present who would like to address the board regarding the World's Best Workforce Report. Okay, seeing no one come forward, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Amy. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned until 7 p.m. for the